Let's be very clear about something from the start. When Prince Harry responded to comments made by Donald Trump about NATO troops in Afghanistan, he was not speaking as a diplomat. He was not speaking as a working royal. He was not speaking on behalf of any government. He was speaking as a veteran, and that distinction is everything. Last week, President Trump suggested that NATO allies had stayed a little off the front lines during the Afghanistan war. That comment immediately sparked backlash from veterans, politicians, and allied nations who knew that the reality on the ground was far more complex and far more costly. Because British troops were on the front lines, Danish troops were on the front lines, Canadian troops were on the front lines, Allied forces fought and died alongside American soldiers. So when Harry issued a formal response emphasizing that those sacrifices deserved to be spoken about truthfully and with respect, it carried weight. Not because of a royal title, not because of palace backing, but because he had actually been there. Harry served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan during his decade-long military career. That is not symbolic service. That is not ceremonial ribbon-cutting. That is deployment. That is risk. That is lived experience. And this is where royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams made an important point. He acknowledged that multiple channels of influence were at play in the broader political response. Governments responded. Officials clarified positions. Diplomats engaged behind the scenes. But he also said Harry's statement was significant. Significant because he was absolutely right to make it. Significant because people were sickened by the original remarks. Significant because he had earned the credibility to speak. Let's sit with that. For years, critics have tried to reduce Harry to a celebrity figure, to someone trading on his royal past. But moments like this remind everyone that long before California, long before Netflix deals, long before media narratives, Harry was Captain Wales serving in a war zone. You cannot rewrite that. You cannot erase 2 tours in Afghanistan. You cannot erase the Invictus Games. You cannot erase the bond between service members who have stood in the same dust, heard the same explosions, and lost the same friends. Harry's response did not name President Trump directly. It did not descend into partisan rhetoric. It focused on one core principle, that the sacrifices of NATO allies deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect. That is not radical. That is not reckless. That is basic decency. And notice something important. He did not frame his statement as a royal. He did not invoke the monarchy. He did not lean on palace tradition. He leaned on his veteran status. Richard Fitzwilliams himself pointed out that Harry's background distinguished his response from official political statements. He had seen 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan. We know that. He started the Invictus Games. We know that. Let's talk about the Invictus Games for a moment. When Harry founded the Invictus Games in 2014, he created a global platform for wounded, injured, and sick service personnel to compete, heal, and rebuild confidence through sport. It was not a vanity project. It was born from his time with injured soldiers and from witnessing firsthand the cost of war. That matters in this context. When someone who has dedicated over a decade to veteran welfare says that sacrifices deserve respect, it resonates differently than when a career politician says it. And here is where the Sussex squad needs to pay attention. This moment dismantles the tired narrative that Harry is somehow irrelevant outside the royal system. Because when it comes to military service, he has something that cannot be taken away: personal credibility. President Trump later softened his language. On Truth Social, he praised British troops, calling them great and very brave soldiers of the United Kingdom and among the greatest of all warriors. He reaffirmed that the bond between US and UK forces is too strong to ever be broken. Those later remarks were welcomed by UK politicians and military figures. And importantly, there has been no suggestion that Harry's comments alone prompted the change in tone. And that is fine, because this is not about claiming he single-handedly shifted presidential rhetoric. It is about acknowledging that his voice contributed to a broader chorus of accountability. Richard Fitzwilliams stressed that Harry's role should be seen as complementary rather than causal. In other words, he was part of the conversation, not the sole driver of it. And that is mature. That is responsible. That is exactly how someone with lived experience should engage in public discourse. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Since stepping back from senior royal duties, Harry and Meghan Markle have been scrutinised every time they speak on anything remotely connected to politics. Critics say they should stay silent. Critics say they forfeited influence. Critics say former royals should not intersect with geopolitical debates. But here is the reality. Harry did not speak as a royal. He spoke as a soldier. There is a difference between partisan campaigning and defending the honour of fellow veterans. And if anything, his transition away from official royal duties gives him more freedom to speak from personal conviction. When he was a working royal, protocol restricted him from political commentary. Now, as a private citizen and veteran advocate, he has more latitude. And he used that latitude to defend the truth about NATO's role in Afghanistan. Let's also remember the emotional context. For veterans, Afghanistan is not an abstract policy debate. It is not a talking point. It is memories of lost friends. It is long deployments. It is trauma that lingers long after headlines fade. So when remarks suggest allies stayed a little off the front lines, that lands heavily. It lands on families who buried sons and daughters. It lands on veterans managing PTSD. It lands on allied nations who sacrificed lives. Harry understood that weight because he has carried it himself, and that is why his intervention mattered. Not because of a crown, not because of a title, but because of shared experience. This also raises a bigger question about the evolving role of former working royals on the international stage. Can they speak? Should they speak? Where is the line between personal conviction and political interference? Harry's case offers a nuanced example. He did not engage in party politics. He did not endorse a candidate. He did not attack a policy platform. He defended the dignity of service members. That is a moral stance grounded in lived experience. And this is where the Sussex narrative shifts again. For years, some critics have framed Harry and Meghan as disconnected from serious global issues, as focused only on media deals and branding. Yet here, we see Harry stepping into a sensitive geopolitical moment and grounding his words in respect for NATO's historic invocation of Article 5 and the sacrifices that followed. Article 5 was invoked for the first time in NATO's history after the September 11 attacks. Allied nations rallied to support the United States. That solidarity shaped the Afghanistan war from the very beginning. To suggest that allies were not fully present on the front lines risks minimizing that historic commitment. Harry's statement reminded people of that history. And let's not overlook something else. This is consistent with his long-standing focus on veterans' welfare and mental health. Since leaving the UK, he has continued to champion causes connected to service personnel. He has spoken about trauma, about healing, about the invisible wounds of war. So this was not random. It was aligned with his track record, and alignment builds credibility. The reaction also exposes an interesting dynamic. When Harry stays silent, critics accuse him of irrelevance. When he speaks, they accuse him of overstepping. It is a no-win frame designed to keep him boxed in. But what we are seeing now is a man who is no longer confined by that box. He is not seeking diplomatic power. He is not trying to replace official channels. He is not positioning himself as a shadow statesman. He is using his voice where it is most authentic. Richard Fitzwilliams made it clear that Harry's background distinguishes him from official political voices. That distinction is important. It allows him to speak from a place of moral authority without claiming governmental authority. And that is a balance many public figures struggle to achieve. Let's also be honest. There are veterans in the United States, the United Kingdom, and across NATO countries who likely appreciated hearing someone with first-hand experience push back respectfully against a narrative they felt misrepresented their service. That kind of solidarity matters. It matters especially in a time when political rhetoric can be polarizing and dismissive. Harry's approach was measured. He did not escalate. He did not insult. He did not personalize the issue. He focused on the principle that sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect. That tone reflects growth. Years ago, critics might have expected a more reactive response. But this was controlled, focused, grounded. And that evolution is part of his broader journey. From a young royal navigating intense scrutiny, to a soldier confronting the realities of war, to a founder of the Invictus Games, to a father, a husband, and an advocate living in California. Each phase has shaped how he uses his voice. And for the Sussex squad, this moment reinforces something we have always said. Harry is more than headlines, more than palace drama, more than tabloid caricatures. He is a veteran who earned the right to speak about the war he fought in. He is a founder who built a global platform for wounded warriors. He is a public figure who understands that words about military sacrifice are not trivial. The broader debate about former working royals and political discourse will continue. It should. Democracies benefit from healthy debate about influence and boundaries, but in this specific case, the line is clear. A veteran defended the honour of fellow veterans. That is not controversy. That is integrity. And if that makes some commentators uncomfortable, perhaps it is because it challenges the simplified narratives they prefer. Harry, stepping into this conversation, reminds the world that leaving royal duties did not mean leaving purpose. It did not mean abandoning the values shaped by his military service. If anything, it freed him to express them more openly. And as the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve, voices with lived experience will always carry unique weight. Harry's statement did not claim power. It claimed truth. It claimed respect. And in a world where rhetoric often overshadows reality, that kind of grounded intervention is worth acknowledging. For the Sussex squad, this is not about politics. It is about recognizing when someone uses their platform responsibly and authentically. Harry did that. He honored the memory of those who served. He reinforced the bond between allies. He reminded leaders that words matter. And he did it not as a prince seeking influence, but as a soldier standing up for fellow soldiers. That is credibility. That is courage. And that is why his voice still resonates far beyond any palace walls.